being honest in that sense, in explaining things in context. And did we have something? Yeah. Like I heard the discussion about just sharing experiences, happy, fun things. That is all part of it as well. But these are I think pretty comprehensive. And interestingly, to listen to the two discussions, I don't know if you were kind of hearing what the other group were saying. There were lots of things that crossed over on these two. So we had how do we foster discipline, and very quickly this idea of well, we can set boundaries and we can make rules and we can give rewards for good behaviour and things came up, but then also the idea of, well, there's another side to discipline which is self-discipline, and it has to come from within the child, and I would argue that we have to be self-disciplined. And I think when we touch on this parenting chart a bit later, I think if we're too self-disciplined and very rigid in the way that we do things, that can have an effect as well on our children and on our relationships. So balance is a kind of key word in everything that we're trying to achieve. Awareness of consequences. And this one, of course, was sparking off lots of interesting discussion about how many times we give warnings and things like that. Early intervention. Does anybody want to elaborate on that one?
That was I suggested that to enable you to not let a situation escalate that you're having to bring in forcible discipline, you can spot it early on. You can either dissipate it by distraction or whatever, or you can get in there, discuss it straight at the beginning so that it doesn't become an issue in the future. So it's kind of preventing it from becoming a problem.
And it links in, doesn't it? I think for me there's a really clear link there with this idea of engaging with the child and showing love through engagement and through spending time with them, because that's how you know your child. And if you don't have that time to be present in the moment with them, and you don't spot things like that, and it's very difficult actually. And having worked as a nanny in my past life, and working with children whom I looked after for 10 hours of the day, so from the moment they woke up till just pyjama time, and mum and dad would come home. Mum and dad I was lucky to work in a family that were very, very open with me, and we had a good relationship. And mum and dad would express how frustrating it was that the children wouldn't listen to them, and that they couldn't get them to get dressed on the weekends. How do you do it? How do you get them to put their own clothes on? They won't do it. They just flutter about the place and they don't get dressed. And that they were having a lot of discipline challenges. Not huge issues, I have to say, because the children were pretty with it. But the challenges came from just not having the time with their kids. And they did on the weekends, and they made a really concerted effort to do that on the weekends, focused, and it really improved things. And they got to the point where eventually Dad gave up his job and just decided to stay at home with them because they were finding it so challenging. That's quite an extreme example, but it's really hard for many people, because if your child goes to bed at 7 o'clock in the evening and you come home from work at 6 o'clock in the evening, you've got an hour to gauge a situation, and your kid is dead. I mean, I see it myself. The minute I walk in the door, I get a shout and a cuddle, and he doesn't want to let go, and he wants to be breastfed, and that's it. And I just say, you don't want me for my intellect.
Well, he's a man.
Exactly. Only interested in one thing comes first. But there's, that real need in them to connect with us, and so it's that connecting time that becomes so important, and it links both of these topics. And even when setting boundaries or giving a child awareness of consequences, and this is a nice one, responsibility being given to the child. Did you want to, was it you guys that put that one, to elaborate?
Yeah, we were just trying to discuss the point that the other group had written about child's choice and control, and we interpreted that as helping them to have some kind of responsibility for the situation themselves, where if they're aware of consequences, and you're both aware that the situation can escalate, then it's giving the child that chance to control, to to control the situation, or at least
Make the right
afterwards.
choices.
Yeah, or at least afterwards, you know, so that you can discuss what happened. Empowering them for the next time, or you know, that kind of awareness about situations like that, especially if they escalate into an angry situation.
Yes, which can happen sometimes. That acknowledgement of the anger and our acknowledgement of the how dealing with that, maybe not at the moment where your child is really angry, where you're really angry, and waiting, and then coming back and, as you say, talking about it later, so that they're gaining something from the experience. The concern that I always have with this idea of punishment is that when we're, you know, it's very much focused around us trying to get a child to do something that we want them to do, which I think we should always question. There are times when they do just have to do things that we want them to do, and that's absolutely part of life. And again, if we use a loving approach to getting them to do it, which doesn't mean saying, oh, everything's fine and that's okay and yes, you don't have to do it, but we can be very firm and loving at the same time, then we do help to take them to that place where they can make decisions and they can predict things and they are able to reflect on things that have happened. Because I think, interestingly, observing parents for the last 13 years has taught me that we have really high expectations of very small children in what we think they can deal with cognitively. And as an educator, and who is very, very concerned with brain development and the psychology of how children develop in their phases of growth, I find it quite astonishing sometimes what parents expect their children to understand.
So their brain's not 7 times slower or something. So if you tell them, you know, we need to go get your shoes on, you know, they're not doing it because they, you know, they're just trying to process it.
For some children,
it's not really noticed.
They are doing it just in their own time.